Hi, good morning. Thank you, Karim. Morning, everybody. You'll see the screen starts off with, or that starts off in the same fashion it does every single time, and it will remain there for the foreseeable future. We've come this far, and it's not only aimed at the people in the room, it is business owner, plumber. Make sure your staff do the same thing. It takes one individual to close your company's doors for 10 days. So make sure you wear your mask. I know it's a nuisance. I moan about it all the time, but it is compulsory. Wash your hands. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth with unwashed hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Even if you suspect our offices got closed down by a lady that thought she had change of season flu. So it happens. Cover your cough or sneeze with a flexed elbow and then throw the tissue in the bin if you have used one. And disinfect frequently used surfaces and objects. We do not want to go back to where we were last year. So on to this morning's presentation. This morning we're going to be talking about water from alternative sources. Pick the topic for a very specific reason. There are areas like our metro that are going through a drought patch. We do have a movement amongst the design professionals to go off-grid, to go green, and it involves or it affects a number of services. So when we're talking alternate water sources, we are basically referring to groundwater, which would be boil type water, be it PV or windmill, or a combination of the two, or rainwater harvesting. Just a quick comment, the grey water recycling one down the bottom, there is a standard for it. Basically, the standard requires the whole design or the whole installation to comply with a rational design by a professional. There's currently, since 2019, when it was published, there were about 12 or 13 or 14 mistakes in it that is currently being rectified. So for the sake of today's presentation, let's ignore grey water because that's a different kettle of fish altogether. So once the standards is patched up, we'll have a look at that. So for now, we're looking at groundwater and rainwater harvesting. So as always, we'll start with a big hammer from the top, and the Water Services Act of I think it's Act 108 of 1997, says every water service authority, albeit a metro, albeit a small municipality, be it a regional services council, whichever water service authority, must make bylaws which contains conditions for the provision of water services, and which, at least for the standard of the services, that being from the local authority or from the water service authority, that now the ones with the green ticks I'm going to read because those are applicable to us. So it's the technical conditions of supply, including quality standards. So the local authority is in charge of that, the quality standards. The installation, alteration, operation, protection, and inspection of water services works, being their own, as well as consumer installations. Then we skip the money bit. We go to the circumstances under which water services may be limited or discontinued, and then the procedure thereof. So if you look at the bylaws will then say that the local authority may discontinue your water supply under these conditions, or if you do X, Y, and Z, they'll discontinue your water. So it's not only a supply thing, it's also a disconnecting thing. And then importantly, the prevention of unlawful connections to water services works, and the unlawful or wasteful use of water. So basically, since 1997, or the latest revision was done in 1997, the Water Services Act says that the municipality is responsible for those 4 ticks. They then went a step further to say that the minister may provide a model bylaw to be used as a guide for services to these authorities. So I'm going to skip through the next couple of slides rather quickly because they all sound pretty much the same. But I need for you to just have, if yours is on here, sorry, if yours is not on here, I apologize. I don't have all of them, but the majority of them were based on that model bylaw. So you'll see the heading, use of water from other sources. You have a look at that one. Specific one is from Beaufort West, right there in the middle of the Karoo. Except with the consent of the engineer and subject to the conditions No person may for domestic, commercial or industrial purposes use or permit the water obtained from a source other than the municipal or the water supply system, or from rainwater tanks which are not connected to your water installation. So herein lies this morning's little presentation. So you can go from there. We'll go to Buffalo City. You'll see they all pretty much run along the same vein. And it also says that the water must not be connected to the municipal water system. Cedarburg, you'll see water pollution restrictions, and owner shall provide and maintain approved measures to prevent the entry of substance which may be of a danger or to health or adversely affect the potability of water supply system or any part of the water installation on his or her premises. So you'll see the general consensus or the general thread through all of these bylaws are pretty much the same. It's about conserving quality of water. It's about not connecting any alternate source to the actual municipal supply. So for the sake of having 60-something% of the plumbers in South Africa up in Gauteng, how's the Mfuleni one goes along the same lines. No person shall use or permit the use of water obtained from a source other than the municipal supply system, other than rainwater tanks which are not connected to the water installation. You can see the bit about the except for the prior approval of the engineer. That would be your city engineer or your executive director, infrastructure and engineering, and according with the conditions. So you'll see something that we'll touch on later. You'll see there's a South African standard for drinking water. And basically it says you can apply for that water or for that exemption if your water complies with that standard. And then it also says in the same paragraph that that approval might be withdrawn if the water quality no longer conforms, or etc. etc. So it then also something that most of them touch on is that if water obtained from a borehole or any other source of supply on the premises is used for the purpose which gives rise to discharge of such water or a portion thereof into the sewage system, the municipality may install a meter in the pipe leading from the borehole or such a source to the points where it is used. Nowadays, you'll find that the municipality have agents doing that, or they'll request the owner to install that and then get the details of that meter and the readings through to them. So shouldn't feel left out in Joburg. The same thing applies, the same rules, the same usage, the same requirements for alternate source if it is, or if it's been approved. So you'll see it all refers to the standards. Don't want to go through all of them. You can actually have a look at your local authority bylaws for every single person in this session, or well, basically every plumber working in a specific area or in a metro or in a local authority should have a copy of his or her bylaws for the area that they work in, because some of them have extra requirements over and above the normal standards that we use. So Maritzburg, you don't have to feel left out there. Msunduzi, the same thing applies. We can go back down to the West Coast just for the sake. And you can read the draft, or you can see the format of the draft bylaw that was used. They all go along the same line. You cannot use water for any other purpose to be connected to the water supply system. If you do, it needs to comply, etc., etc. And then if you do use it, you need to meter it. Nelson Mandela Bay Metro, the same thing applies. And interesting to note, most of these say from any other source. So that would be grey water, rainwater, boil water, whichever source you pick. It all applies to, or it all boils down to the same requirement. City of Tshwane, same thing there, have the same requirements. Just a quick explanation of your system at your local authority. What we have on top is we have a metered consumption. So you have water meter, you use the water, and according to that scale, or according to the water that you use, your council then calculates your water, well, obviously the rate for your water consumption, but your sewage charges are based on something called a K factor. In PE, our K factor, or sorry, in Quebec, K factor is 0.7, which means the calculation is done based on the fact that 70% of your water ends up going back to the treatment works and 30% waters your garden or washes your vehicles, although in this current time we're not allowed to do that. So basically what the council would be concerned about, sorry, let me just get this thing, yeah. What the council would be concerned about is through this process, your consumption is calculated or is measured, and your K or your K factor helps sewage charges being calculated. You pay them, that money goes towards the maintenance of that sewage plant, whether it be conveyance to the plant or the treatment at the plant. So by using alternate source that is not metered, you'd actually be contributing directly to that system without payment. So most local authorities frown on that. Okay, so money aside, council aside, everything else aside, we go back to the plumber's Bible and quoted directly from this. Basically, water supply quality, human consumption. Take note, human consumption. We're not watering gardens, we're talking about potable water. And the requirements are straightforward. Storage tank, I'm going to skip about the non-applicable bits. Storage tanks shall be regularly cleaned and kept free of contamination. Stored water shall be maintained at a temperature not exceeding 20 degrees. For those of you old enough or that have been around the country, you'll find in the Karoo and places they actually use rocks and they pack them around the water tanks to keep the temperature in the tank down. The quality of water shall be such as to comply with SANS 241 Part 1 and Part 2. So we saw that in the standards and we'll have a look at that shortly. So you'll see Part C in 712 refers to keeping the tank clean. The next reference to that tank would be in 6522. It says that a tank under operating conditions shall not have any openings to the atmosphere other than an overflow pipe and a suitably protected vent. These are actual photos from water supply tanks that have been used to supply. Two of them were actually to an old age home. So you can see where this could be a definite problem. In the same breath, your local authority bylaws would require for your tank to be cleaned on an annual basis and proof but not proof of payment, but a receipt or an invoice from the company, the plumber or the cleaning company that did the work needs to be maintained as a record. But any storage tank shall be so placed and special measures taken so that the tank can be readily drained and then inspected and cleaned on the inside. So you can see, we all seen when you drain a burst geyser or there's a problem and you drain them, that bottom quarter or that bottom 10%, if you want to call it that, has always got the sediment and the mess in it. So this is part of what the standard requires from your water storage tanks. Then it also says that the temperature needs to be maintained below 20 degrees Celsius. So there's a standard for the control of Legionella in water systems, for the simple reason that it is a real concern or it is a real danger. So you'll see below 20 degrees, they can survive, but they're not dormant. So the moment you start raising the temperature in that storage tank from, let's call it 20 to 50, covering that whole range, but specifically 35 to 46. So for the guys that stay, I would say Bloem, Karoo, inland, even where I stay 30 kilometers from the actual coastline, and our summer temperatures average around the late 30s, early 40s. So you could see that that is the ideal growth range for this very dangerous disease. So if it says maintain below 20 degrees, it's not to give you extra work or to stuff you around, it is to actually protect the water. Then the last one says that your water, making it or calling it potable, means that your water needs to comply with SANS 241, which is a two-part document. The first part deals with the actual microbiological, physical, aesthetic, and chemical determinants of that specific water, or that is what water should look like. And then the second part is the application of part one. In other words, what you need to do, your risk assessments, your monitoring of the water, etc., etc. So it becomes a full-time job to have a look at what is happening there. Just a quick for your information slide here. There is a national standard for polyethylene storage tanks for water and chemicals. So if you are going to be venturing into something, catching rainwater for whatever purpose or storing water somewhere, make sure that your manufacturer complies, or they make sure these 9 points, well, sorry, there we go, 4 to 9. If you look at the standard, it's actually quite comprehensive. It even involves a 14-pound hammer being swung at the joints to see if you can break it. The roto molding guys will tell you this is a topic on its own. The main thing I'd like to bring to your attention with regards to this water being stored, the difference between a good and a bad tank. Anything that lets light onto water, especially if it's being stored, not moved, or not moved quickly enough, or circulated, you end up getting growth in that water. It is a given. For the guys that have battled with installation of sub-water meters, if it's a wet dial meter and there's water in that meter and it doesn't get used often enough, you'll find even the water meter dial goes green, because the water inside there, exposed to the sun, the first thing that happens is that algae starts growing in the water and you end up with a problem. So it's just for your information sake. Then to finish up on this whole alternate source thing, no connection shall be made between the general installation conveying water from the supply main, in other words, the municipal main, and an installation conveying water from any other source. It's a question or a matter of, like we discussed at the beginning, it could be any one of different alternate sources or any other supply that is on site. You are not allowed to, it says shall, it's not should, or it's not a nice to have, it's an actual statement that no connection shall be made between these here. So that is from our national standard. The next thing that guys tend to forget is that the moment you have water dumped into a tank or into a storage vessel, and you need to move that to the actual plumbing of the house, or you need to move that to a different point, there is a pump involved. So whether you buy it at your favorite hardware store, or whether you buy it at the local agri co-op, or whether you have a friend that sells pumps for a living, the moment you install any pump into a water supply, where a pumping connection is provided, an RPZ backflow preventer shall be installed between that pump connection and the communication pipe serving the installation. Now, if you really want to get me excited about plumbing, we're talking RPZ, we're talking like the Rolls-Royce of backflow prevention. It is not a nice to have. The standard says there shall be one of those installed between the pumping connection and the municipal main. The guys that go out and work on new installations or that do maintenance, you'll get to some places where the water dribbles out the tap. Anything that you put on, or any pump that you start out there without suitable protection, you'll find that your client's tank will be filling the municipal mains. And yes, there are non-return valves or non-return valves in some water meters, but not all of them have that in there. So the same thing applies to the actual suction side of the pump. A non-return valve shall be installed in the outlet pipe between the tank and the pumping connection. I'm not encouraging the installation of these. I'm just saying that the standard says if you are going to be pumping water, A, an RPZ is required, and B, a non-return valve is required. That is over and above the normal shuttle valves that you would have around a pump, etc., etc. So then, just to basically finish off, Annex D at the back that runs or that speaks to cross-connection control, backflow prevention. You'll find that there are webinars available around those specific topics. Then at the same time, Patrick Gordon's done some nice work around also about the non-return, the protection, the backflow portion. So get yourself informed around these things and make sure that when you do get approached, that at least you are aware of what's happening here. The two things I'd like to point out here for sake of this presentation is only potable water shall be supplied to plumbing fixtures or outlets. The standard, the deemed to satisfy standard does not allow the connection of rainwater to any plumbing fixture. Yeah, but Adrian, it's only a toilet. No one drinks from a toilet. The problem is not that. The problem is that you are connecting to a system. Someone else might come and cut a tea on that supply that goes to their toilet. So as things stand now, only potable water shall be supplied to plumbing fixtures and outlets. And then no device or system, be it an alternate water system, be it a rainwater tank system, any system that may permit the introduction of foreign substance into the water service shall be connected directly or indirectly to any part of that water supply system. So that would be the, let's call it the gut shot to all of these little alternate supplies and all these alternate connections that are being made. Then, sorry about this. You look at this installation, we got called to an inspection where people were using alternate source supply, and they heard that they weren't allowed to have any backflow to the municipal supply. So this is what we found on site. So if you look at that little installation there, firstly, that was done underground. You can see the actual meter box here. So once that was covered up and you got called there to do work, you wouldn't know about that valve. It's a non-service, or it's a not serviceable valve, and it is not suitable for backflow. We just saw we needed an RPZ if someone's going to pump water in that system. And then the standard also says that no copper or copper alloy, which is basically brass, may be used unless suitably protected against external corrosion, ash, salt, ammonia, magnesite, anything, especially with us along the coast. You put that underground, you are bound to have hassles. Then lastly, Mr. Lewis said integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. So what I'm asking you is, do not entertain requests to sign COCs, even if it's someone's backyard, sorry, or it is a supply somewhere that you think is never going to be found. Do not, if you don't issue COCs, do not issue any correspondence from your company to sign off on someone's weekend project. It is going to come back. If it's a health thing, someone gets sick or something gets wrong or something goes wrong and the council traces that water or that the water contaminating their source, then we are going to, it will end up costing you somewhere along the line. It might not be now, it might be in a year or two in that imported non-return valve fails. It might be when there's a hassle with the water meter being changed to one that doesn't have a non-return. It could be one of any things. And I tell you, someone, they'll point immediately. So it all ends up boiling down to making sure that do not entertain requests that will put your company at risk. I know we're talking drought. I know we're talking water interruptions in supply, etc., etc. It's something that we all have to deal with, but do not let your company be the one that ends up taking responsibility for it. So, Karim, have we got any questions?
Thank you very much, Adrian, for this informative session. I believe there are no questions from my side. Is there anything you'd like to add before I end off, Adrian?
No, I'm happy if there's no questions as such, but the crux of what I'm trying to get across this morning is that yes, there is a section in the standard that talks to alternate water supply or a alternate supply. It is a reality. It is happening out there. All as I'm saying is there are rules applicable to this reality, and it is for the plumber, the professional, to make sure that there is We've got a shopping center that runs on boils. They spent close on 4 or 5 million rand getting their tanks disconnected from the municipal mains. They've got UV filters. They've got this 7-stage filter process with pumps. These guys went to consultants and they spent millions on getting that water supply done. So unless it was designed by a professional like that and you are disconnected from that municipal supply, please guys, do not get involved with it. I noticed some chats going on here. Have we got any?
Yes, I see we've got a comment and a question that came in. The note is a COC does not have an expiry date. And the question is, do the requirements change from council to council?
The first comment, Mr. Botha, thank you very much. You do have a valid point there. You are basically married to that job and okay, let's not go into that. You are basically married to that job once you've signed that COC for it. And remember, if it was done by the owner over a weekend, first things first, the COC says it was done by you or under your supervision. So you definitely take responsibility. And then the next question, yes, the requirements do change from council to council. The ones that we looked at, they are pretty much along the same lines. There are even more restrictive bylaws. There are even some of them that says that you need to apply to the municipality if you intend on erecting or installing any water tanks or even rainwater tanks. You have to put an application to that specific council. So that's why I suggest that in the area you work, you make sure you get a copy of your local bylaws, and bearing in mind that those are the guys that are going to make sure that the water, or they're responsible for the quality of their drinking water. So if anyone's going to come looking for who polluted their water source, it'll be the local authority. So yeah, definitely it is a problem.
Yeah, thank you very much, Adrian. I believe that's all the questions. Any last remarks before I end off?
Not really, other than guys, keep safe out there. Like I said, we have survived 2021 up to now. I believe the numbers have started going up again. Whether you're a conspiracy theorist or whether you're just a plumber trying to make a living out there, keep safe, look after yourself, your families, your staff and their families. Make sure that we all come home every evening healthy and fit for the next day. Keep looking after yourself. We'll chat again soon.